First disclaimer, and there will be a couple tonight, I'm here as a private citizen and I'm not representing the views of the Northern Beaches Council. So we have 493 people have registered for this webinar. We also have a group of about 30 people who have gathered together in one of the clubs because they don't have access to the technology so that they can watch the webinar. And hi to all of you, great to see you. And don't go to the bar too often. There's lots of important information to listen to tonight. Now, Transport New South Wales also wants us to emphasise that they have nothing to do with this webinar. They're concerned that the material that to promote the webinar might have been construed to have been them. Let me assure you, it is not endorsed by Transport New South Wales. The webinar was organised only 10 years ago by the Balgowlah Residents Group with support from the Baringa Bush Residents Group in Seaforth, the Clontarf Community Forum and the North Harbour Community Group. And can I request that the panellists put themselves on mute, please? The decision to hold the webinar followed the unsuccessful request of the Balgowlah Resident Group to get an extension of time to review the EIS. Now let me show you a photograph of what the EIS looks like. It is a massive, massive document, over 10,000 pages. Sure, you can look at it online if you've got the ability to do so. And unfortunately, only very limited printed copies were available. And due to COVID, only an online webinar was available. So it's been very difficult for residents to get their questions answered, which is why the Balgowlah Resident Group has decided to put on this seminar tonight. The Northern Beaches Council will be making a submission to the EIS, which is expected to include a thorough examination of the impact on local streets in Balgowlah, North Harbour, North Balgowlah and Seaforth of the potential rat runs that are expected to develop as drivers find their way to get into the tunnel. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Sarah Grattan online tonight. She's the chair of the Council's Transport Strategic Reference Group. Now, what are our primary objectives tonight? Well, first of all, is to help residents to understand how the project will impact them. We hope to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions and to get answers. And we also hope that we will motivate you to make a submission to the EIS, and we can assist you in putting together an effective submission if you need assistance. The panellists tonight are all locals with relevant experience who have actually gone through the 10,000 pages and drawn out what they consider the most important elements of this EIS to us as residents. They attended the Transport for New South Wales virtual briefing session, and they're very well equipped to address our issues tonight. So this is how the session will run. We will have our presentation by our local panellists. We do invite you to ask questions. I see there are already 2 that have been asked. If you look at the bottom of your screen, those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, you'll see that there is a Q&A section. If you type in your question there, hopefully we will get to that at the end of the seminar. Now, a request. There is going to be hundreds of you online. In fact, there's already hundreds of you online. Welcome. Please, if you see that your question has already been asked, don't ask it again, because poor old me is going to have to go through them all and try and pick out the ones that are the most relevant. We do give you a guarantee that the questions that we don't have time to answer tonight, they will be typed up and put on our website with the answers in the next couple of days. How's that for service? So the session will run for about an hour, and then we will have the Q&A at the end of that. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Terry LaRue. Terry's going to cover the Beaches Link Tunnel history. Now, Terry's probably known to many of you. He's extremely active in the community with resident groups, and I really do want to acknowledge Terry for putting together tonight's webinar with all our colleagues. He was actively involved in the group to save the Manly Oval, and he is a retired consulting techno-economist with a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master's degree in economics. So Terry, over to you.
Thank you, Candy. What I'd like to start with is to show all the people online what is involved with the Beaches Link Tunnel. And what I'm going to show you first is the Northern Beaches Hospital, and that the project ends at the Northern Beaches Hospital, but the tunnel ends at about there in North Seaforth. So this is the Seaforth leg of the tunnel. There's also the Balgowlah leg of the tunnel. And then the tunnel starts in Artarmon, where it links in with the Gore Hill Freeway to go into the Lane Cove tunnel, and then it links in with the Warringah Freeway and also into the new proposed Western Harbour Tunnel, which is what I'm showing you here, and that leads you to Roselle, where there is the West Connect project, and that links in with the M4 going west, and it also links in with the airport and the proposed M8. What you now have is just the Balgowlah end of the Beaches Link Tunnel. So there's the Spit Bridge. The tunnel comes from Northbridge. It goes under Middle Harbour, and then it forks into two. The one fork goes up the hill into Seaforth, and that's where the tunnel entrance will be, close to the water tanks above Manly Dam. The other branch of the tunnel goes to Balgowlah, where it stops in the middle of the Bridge Creek deviation, and then there is a link road from Bridge Creek through what's now the Balgowlah Golf Course, and links up with Sydney Road at the intersection of Maritimo Street, and where the red dot is now, that's where Ballyboys is. The Beaches Link Tunnel was announced in early 2017, and it was commented at the time in the Financial Review and other media outlets that it was no coincidence that the tunnel was announced at the time of the by-elections in Manly and the by-elections for the seat in Mosman. The first design of the Beaches Link came out in 2017, and this was the tunnel that came down. This is the Bridge Creek deviation here. This is the Balgowlah Golf Course, and it came down through the Bridge Creek Valley, and then it stopped with cars going left into the deviation and having to come right into the deviation as well. And this was a pretty dumb design, but the RMS was pretty serious about it because it served compulsory acquisition notices to all the properties along Serpentine Crescent. The government has been asked to extend the time for us to review the EIS and to make our submissions, and we know the reason why they wouldn't grant us an extension, and it comes because we know that in 2019, Minister Constance told the mayors of Mosman, North Sydney and the Northern Beaches that I want and will have the contracts for the construction of the Beaches Link Tunnel signed before the next state election in 2023. In December last year, at the launch of the EIS for the Beaches Link Tunnel, he said, many said this tunnel would never be built. Only a Liberal government can deliver the Beaches Link Tunnel. What is important for the government to realize is that this project simply has too many uncertainties, and there's a potential for long-term problems for them to rush it. Further work needs to be done on understanding the long-term environmental damage and whether the tunnel is really necessary. And you can form your own opinion when you've seen what everybody else has to say in this webinar. The next question people ask me is, when will a final decision be made? Where does the EIS fit into the process? Well, I'll start at the very end of the decision-making process, and that is, at some stage, the Cabinet has to study a business case which is prepared by Treasury and the Expenditure Review Committee. Once the submissions to the EIS have been lodged, that is on the 1st of March this year, the Department of Planning will review them and suggest changes to the design or ask for further work to be done by Transport for New South Wales. At this stage, there will be little or no interaction between Transport for New South Wales and the community. The important departments from this stage onwards, in order to progress this to the Cabinet, is going to be the Department of Planning. After the Department of Planning has reviewed all the submissions, it begins negotiations with Transport for New South Wales, who will eventually discuss the problems and issues raised in these submissions, and they will make a recommendation to Rob Stokes on whether to approve the design with conditions, refuse the design, or ask that the further work and community consultation be done. Typically, the department recommends a modified design with a range of conditions. This is expected in late 2021. Only then can Transport for New South Wales develop a final reference design for contractors and seek indicative quotes to allow them to develop a capital cost estimate for the business case. The more changes there are and the more conditions are imposed by the department, the higher is the capital cost. At the same time, Transport for New South Wales and Treasury continue negotiations with potential investors in the Beaches Link and the Western Harbour Tunnel projects to establish how much they are likely to pay to buy a stake in the tunnel projects. Then the final business case is prepared for the Cabinet sometime in the first half of 2022, unless there are complications following a review of the financial and environmental risks. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you so much, Terry. And welcome to those of you who may have just joined us. A tip for everybody, if you go up to your Zoom controls, you'll see it says View. I recommend that you change the setting that says side-by-side speaker. That way you get to see the slides and the person who is speaking at the moment rather than all the panelists who are sitting waiting to come online. Okay, so thank you. Our next speaker is Bruce Kitson. Bruce is retired. He has a background in forensic accounting with a postgraduate qualifications in dispute resolution and legal studies. Bruce is affectionately known by us all as Mr. Gipper. He is the person who will dig and dig and dig and send in the Freedom of Information requests until he gets to the bottom of what he's concerned about. So it's fantastic to have Bruce on the team and also to speak to us tonight about the business case. Does it add up? Over to you, Bruce.
Thanks, Candy. The EIS is not concerned about economic analysis of the business case for the tunnel. The EIS comprises about 11,000 pages and contains very little information to enable an economic model to be developed. It is proposed to spend circa $10 billion plus on the Beaches Link tunnel. This is forecast to reduce the traffic on Military Road by 10%. Mossman residents will be the major beneficiaries from the project, but will not pay anything for the project. They will enjoy less traffic congestion and increased property prices. Now that I have your attention, I will move on. Next slide, please. There are only three main roads that serve Sydney Northern Beaches, being Military Road and Spit Bridge, Roseville Bridge, Ringa Road, and Monavale Road. It is disturbing that the Traffic for New South Wales is forecasting an average reduction in traffic through all of these arteries of only 14.5% for a $10 billion spend. The EIS also states the reduction on Spit Road will be 33% less traffic. How this reconciles with a reduction of 10% on Military Road is unexplained. It is likely that such a large proportion of traffic reduction crossing the Spit Bridge would not reduce the traffic using Military Road by more than 10%. In my forecast, I've used a reduction of 33%. These forecasts are based on existing uses. They do not take into account extra usage from users in the future who are currently not commuting to or from the Northern Beaches, or potential reduced usage. Factors are. Next slide, please. Extra density of population in the Northern Beaches, facilitated by changes to planning rules, will cause extra traffic demand. Work from home makes it difficult to forecast volumes of traffic once things return to, quote, normal. Increased usage of public transport, once vaccinations permit an end to social distancing limitations, will impact on usage of cars. Beeline buses, the new bus service from Dee Why to Chatswood, and a planned express bus service to North Sydney Metro Station, once it has been built, will impact on tunnel usage. Reduced congestion allowing a quicker journey are unlikely to increase are likely to increase visitors to the northern beaches, particularly on weekends. Reduction in greenhouse gas emissions may impact on road traffic. All of these make it difficult to forecast future traffic demand for the tunnel. It is likely that the Beaches Link Tunnel will be sold to a toll operator such as Transurban. They will be interested in maximising car usage. Each car pays a toll. Having buses in place of cars will reduce their toll income. The toll per use for a car is based on a government undertaking in 2017 that the indicative toll would be $6 one-way trip in 2017 dollars, to be escalated at the rate of inflation, which is assumed to be 2.5% per annum. It is assumed that the tunnel commences operations in 2029 and the toll will be $7.70 each way. The capital cost of the tunnel is assumed to be $10 billion. This includes allowance for property acquisitions, etc., and is not limited to costs of construction. It is estimated that a toll operator would only be prepared to pay circa $4 to $5 billion based on the net present value of forecast cash flows. The toll operator is only concerned about future cash flows and return on investment. Actual cost of the tunnel is not a concern for them. The Beaches Link Tunnel is a feeder road. It feeds traffic from the northern beaches into the road network. If the toll operator owns other parts of the road network, they also pick up additional tolls from traffic using other parts of the network. Thus, in theory, a toll operator who owns other parts of the network may be prepared to pay more. If the Beaches Link Tunnel was sold along with other toll road assets, it may result in an improved outcome. The new owner may consider reduced tolls on weekends. Northern Beaches residents are unlikely to be using the tunnel to any great extent on weekends, and reduced toll may help fill up the tunnel and the operator picks up extra tolls on other toll network assets owned by the operator. The toll operator wants the traffic to be moving so that through traffic is maximised. Having stop-start traffic in a traffic jam reduces the toll income. Further thought needs to be given to time of day tolling and other measures to move traffic from peak hours. The proposal is based on cars using Warringah Road and Mona Vale roads, changing their existing travel route and using this tunnel. The EIS does not plan for a change to the road network to facilitate ease of transfer to the entry access points for the Beaches Link Tunnel. We will hear more about traffic congestion and rat running later in this webinar. Based on the above, the tunnel operator is likely to pay circa $5 to $7 billion for infrastructure costing the state government $10 billion to build. Unfortunately, the track record of constructing major road infrastructure within approved budget estimates is not good. The government may consider this to be economic because of the benefits to the community that are not benefits to the toll operator, which is limited to toll revenue. But as a standalone project, it is not financially viable. Thanks, Candy.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Some good food for thought there. I noticed that a couple of you have raised your hand. I'm sorry, we're not able to use that method tonight because there are hundreds online. If you have a question, please just type it into the Q&A section, and hopefully we will get to that at the end of the webinar. And also, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Zali Stegel, who's online tonight. Okay, let's move on to our next presentations, which is on our precious environment. What's at risk at Manly Dam, Burnt Bridge Creek and Balgowlah. We have two very, very good speakers on this topic, Anne Collins and Louise Williams. So Anne Collins has been involved in community projects in this area for a very long time, since 2007, when she was involved with the Nolan and Passmore Reserve in preserving that as a multi-purpose recreation facility. Her background is in project management and facilitation with large corporate implementation and change management projects. She's also a volunteer on a number of boards, including the Save Manly Dam Catchment Committee and the Manly Warringah War Memorial State Park Manly Dam Advisory Committee. We'll be hearing first of all from Louise, who is an award-winning writer, science commentator and consultant to universities and research centres. Louise has a tertiary education qualifications in communications and is studying conservation and land management. And she's co-founder of the Warringah Bush Community Garden and the Warringah Bush Residents Group, and co-author of ABC TV's War on Waste Impact Report and Quitting Plastic. So let's start with you, Louise.
Thank you very much, Candy. It's a big topic looking at this tunnel, but one thing I wanted to focus on was what's the cost to the environment? We're a community that many of us choose to live here because of our wonderful natural environment, and there's a lot at stake. I'm just going to mention two quite important issues. One's Burnt Bridge Creek Bushland Reserve. You might know it. It runs from Seaforth down to Queenscliff Lagoon. It's the bike track, the walking track. And if you're like me, you just, sigh. It's just a relief to walk in there, feel the cool, and be just enclosed in all those beautiful trees. So the EIS said in Appendix O, the freshwater creek runs for about 4 kilometres and is a vital ecological corridor. Northern Beaches Council, which looks after the reserve, again says the protection and enhancement of the native riparian vegetation in the reserve is crucial for the movement of wildlife. So it's a well-valued corridor. Next slide, please, Terry. So what's going to happen to Burnt Bridge Creek? It sits at the down at the bottom of the Balgowlah construction site at Balgowlah Golf Course. So there'll be some very significant impacts during construction. So if you have a look at that beautiful fig tree to your right, removal of large mature trees and habitat, adjustment of a small section of creek, which means putting it in a drain really, removal of the water retention dam in the golf course, and that's the water source for endangered grey-headed flying foxes, numerous birds and lizards. We'll have about 500,000 litres of wastewater a day going into the creek and into Queenscliff Lagoon. Probably the excavation exposure of contaminated soils, and something called a reduction in base flow of 79%. What that means is that the water flowing down the creek will reduce by 79% during construction, which will essentially reduce the creek to a trickle. Next slide, please, Terry. But in the long term, the EIS says substantial base flow impacts at Burnt Bridge Creek are also expected during the operational phase, with up to a 96% reduction being modelled. That essentially means that there will be no more creek. The creek will become a drain. There will be no water for all of the fabulous species that it supports. And of course, the flora, the trees, they're for a moist environment. So everything will change. So will everything in our water catchment. The EIS also says this could impact ecosystems reliant on the water within these creeks. Next slide, please. The most serious impact in our area would be to a vulnerable grey-headed flying fox colony that would be without its water source. Flying foxes are protected at state level and national level, and they're really important for our ecosystems because they are the night foragers. They are responsible for pollinating at night and for maintaining the genetic diversity of our forests. They're called a keystone species because without them, our forests are really in trouble. Next slide, please. I also just want to bring up what's happening at Middle Harbour. Like Sydney Harbour, as you may have heard in the news, there's quite a considerable amount of toxins lying in the sediment on the seabed. So that's a result of years and years of industrial use, and we've spent a lot of time cleaning up our harbours. Next slide, please. So during the construction, there's going to be considerable disturbance of that silt. So as the EIS says, sediment poses a high contamination risk to construction, given that contamination is known to be present within the sediments which are likely to be excavated. You can see there that the link between Seaforth and Northbridge, there's a lot of work that will occur that will stir up that sediment. Next slide, please. This is what the big structure is. It's called a coffer dam. It's sort of like building something in the water, then draining the water out. So you've got a kind of platform that you can work from. Huge amount of disturbance caused by the construction of the coffer dams. You can see on the slide to the left where they'll be placed. Next slide, please. So the solution that's posed in the EIS is that there will be something called silt curtain used. And this isn't a tidal environment, so you have to imagine it's not a still waterway. So silk curtains are supposed to limit or stop the movement of contaminated sediment. You'll see on the right-hand side a list of the sort of toxins that are in the silt and the Australian government's statement on those toxins. And recently a professor of environmental toxicology came out and said that he has never seen a sediment curtain that's worked 100%. And this contradicts the map, again, provided by the EIS. You can see that on the left. That's the map that shows the extent of sediment deposition 2 weeks after the completion of dredging activities. So you can see that sediment will move all the way to Clontarf, to the beach, to the dog beach, to the picnic area, and right across Middle Harbour. So I think we have some very serious questions to ask about the movement of contaminated sediment in Middle Harbour. I know I don't have much time to speak. I just wanted to ask people to think about, writing in and to ask the Transport for New South Wales to modify and improve the environmental outcomes for the tunnel. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you so much, Louise. So we'll now move on to Anne Collins, and I understand that we have a short video that we're going to show as part of Anne's presentation.
Unfortunately, the video isn't showing through on my screen, Candy, so we'll have a go at showing it towards the end, unfortunately.
Okay, and if worse comes to worse, we can put it on the website for those who are interested. All right, Anne, sorry about that. Let's have a listen to your presentation, Anne, and we'll see what we can do about the video.
Thanks, Candy. And that's a shame. So there's a few assumptions in my presentation, but we'll move on. So let's build a road on a ridge. I aim to shed a little more light on some of the implications that will come out in the video when you see that. And a special thanks to Malcolm Fisher for putting that together, and for Greg Cole for some of these drone shots that you can see here. People ask, where is Manly Dam in relation to the tunnel? Well, it borders the Waycoast Parkway between Seaforth and French's Forest. It includes the golf course. It's on the eastern side, that is the beach side. Next slide. So how do we widen a road on a ridge? So the new Waycoast Parkway will be over 40 metres wide in places, wider than the ridge. So much of the road will need major earthworks to widen the space for flat construction. It's currently surrounded by trees, but it will become visible from everywhere. And by the way, the EIS says the new edge would be subject to degradation by the establishment and spread of weeds, enriched runoff from road pavement, and dumping of rubbish. I think more than runoff will fall off this road structure if you look on the right-hand side there. Next slide. So why should we trust the EIS? So Manly Dam and other areas have been impacted by major projects. In this area alone, there's been the Manly Vale Public School, Northern Beaches Hospital Road, and currently Mona Vale Road. All of these have faced fines for non-compliance and for damages. Here they are, distancing themselves from other Traffic for New South Wales failures. The area of overlap has been heavily modified, they say. This process is fraught. Contractors use the EIS to quote and control their work. If it's not specified in the EIS, it won't happen. We need to highlight what we want looked at in more detail in our submissions. We know that Transport for New South Wales have contingencies for failures, but failures cause irreparable damage. Just ask the residents behind Manly Vale Public School. Next slide, please. We can't afford to do it properly, they claim. Appendix O indicates that Transport New South Wales won't afford to do it properly. So the map highlights the areas where the proposed water quality controls consist of 2 permanent basins, 18 swales in green, and 2 inline gross pollutant traps. I quote again, the project operational water quality design targets would not be achieved at the Waycoast Parkway, etc., etc. It would also require higher treatment efficiency controls such as biofiltration swales, which would not be possible due to topographical constraints. As you saw on the other slide, it's very difficult to put some swales on the top of those ridges that they'll be building. So they're not even pretending to make it work. They want the road built. Next slide, please. Here are 2 conundrums to consider. 1, the water treatment capacity, shown earlier, will fail. Based on the assumptions in EIS, in 2020, the system would have failed every month. Road runoff will pour through Manly Dam Reserve and Garrigal National Park. Freshwater swimming, water skiing in Manly Dam would be compromised. So do we spend more money and create further damage? A second conundrum, having lights on the road. They provide human safety, but animal destruction. So if there are lights, insects, nocturnal animals, diurnal animals, all impacted. But if there's no lights, it's dangerous for humans on a shared pathway. Conclusion, such a wide road should not be built in this sensitive area. Next slide, please. Let's have a perspective. In 2018, Sydney Water did an environmental study on this piece of land and found it to be rich in biodiversity. However, what a waste of public money, because, next slide, please. In another area, here we have the site that keeps on giving. So Mike Baird promised this back to Manly Dam after the development of Manly Vale Public School, after all that decimation. And here we go, it now will become a 24/7 dedicated construction and a dive site and destroy all of the rich biodiversity. But they claim to be able to hand it back at the end, and a very small piece of land. Next slide, please. This gives you a picture from the air of the proposed construction site. And you see that you will be able to, the destruction will be visible from Wakehurst Golf Course as you're eating your lunch there. Next slide, please. You'll see in the video that there is lots of flora that's impacted. And one of the key things here is that Duffy's Forest, which is a vulnerable and protected species, but another 2.5 hectares will be gone. However, and it's a massive impact to so much other vegetation, but apparently you can just buy your way out of this using the flawed offset and biobanking process. Next slide. And so if you're an animal, how do you survive the years of construction or of operation? So the crossing the road now becomes a 40-metre process, but you can't get across because there'll be fauna fences stopping you from doing that. So next slide, please. So we're privileged to live in an area with such natural amenity. Let's not destroy it for our kids. Please write a submission to save to save these eastern pygmy possums and your local green lungs. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And I think there's some very important content in that presentation. And there's been a number of questions actually coming through already in relation to the environment. So I think there's a lot of interest in that aspect of the EIS. So our next speaker is Marco Corrent. Marco is going to talk about the potential design changes for North Seaforth. And I think Marco is somebody who's been passionately involved with this project since it was first announced in 2017. He's worked very closely with residents of Seaforth and North Balgowlah, and also he's been successful in working with the government authorities and getting some initial changes to the first design that was done. So Marco, we're looking forward to hearing your presentation tonight.
Thank you very much, Candy. Before I start, though, I'd like to acknowledge that it was a team effort. I was the spokesperson, but it was backed up by a number of individuals who provided a lot of technical information and technical consulting to the project. What I wanted to share with you all this evening is essentially some of the information that we've garnered in conversations with Transport for New South Wales during a number of sessions that they've held for the community, but also set questions that we've asked them independently of that. As Candy mentioned, we've managed to get involved in this project very early on, literally I think the second week after it was announced, and we were able to put together some alternate designs and alternate thinking for Transport for New South Wales, and to their credit, they thankfully did come back and listen to those. What I wanted to share with you, though, is some things that have come out of these discussions which are an area of concern. Essentially, it's not because Transport for New South Wales are not giving us information, it's because a lot of the detail to this relies on contractors being chosen for the project and decisions that those contractors will make. So essentially what we're going to see is overall with the project, there's a large amount of heavy vehicle movements that will be running through the suburb. I've listed numbers there of 795 heavy vehicles per day that will be running from Monday to Saturday, from 8 to 1 on Saturday. And importantly, these heavy vehicles will essentially go in a direction where the spoil is required to be dumped. Now, what we've ascertained is that a lot of the projects around Sydney, infrastructure projects, a lot of the spoil has been going north, around the Newcastle area and north of the state. Recently, there's been a change for that spoil to be required out west with the building of the new airport. And also there's potential that some of that spoil will also go south. What this will mean is the truck movements will essentially digress from where the EIS basically says it will happen. At the moment, they are saying the trucks will head north along the Wakehurst Parkway and then also north along the Bridge Creek deviation, leaving the Balgowlah golf course. But essentially, if that spoil's required elsewhere, it will go where it's needed and it will follow routes like Spit Bridge and potentially also the Wakehurst Parkway, Frenchs Forest Road, and also will join up. So there's a number of concerns that we have, and we're continually going to be working with Transport to nut these out and work through those concerns. But once again, it's where the spoil will be required and the contractor makes that decision. It's got nothing to do with Transport for New South Wales. The EIS is essentially not explaining that in any detail, and that continues to be a very big cause for concern. Also, because if you look at where the trucks will be leaving from the Balgowlah golf course, there's a potential that they can travel across Sydney Road through the Seaforth roundabout down Frenchs Forest Road. And there's some major issues with that. With the recent changes in the bus timetables, there's a new hub and spoke process, or a hub and spoke model rather, that's been put together by Transport for the buses, which see the interchange at Seaforth becoming more busier with buses interchanging there, people stopping to get connecting services to the city. And also with additional truck flows through there, we're really concerned that there's going to be a lot of traffic through there that we probably haven't thought of yet. Further to that, we've also contacted a heavy haulage contractor and ran them by potential routes that the trucks would take. And they have confirmed to us that essentially the trucks leaving site, going to and from site, will find the quickest route back to site, because it's all about picking up spoil and getting another load out. And that really raises concerns for the corner down at Seaforth Public School, which that haulage contractor has actually confirmed that in greasy, slippery conditions, those trucks would have to navigate that corner at very, very slow speed for them not to be an accident. So that's quite a concern as well. One of the other things that's come up as well is contractor parking. We brought this up very early with Transport, and they essentially have confirmed to us that once again, it will be dictated by what the contractor, how many people, how many workers are on site for that period. And also further to that, they did confirm that there will be overflow into the streets for parking, and that it is a problem at all of their work sites and has continued to be that. The only saving grace that they've provided is that it will be up to council and the residents to work collaboratively to come up with a solution for that. We don't know what that looks like yet, but that is a real concern for us, because there will be limited parking at that site. And depending on what those final numbers are, we've seen numbers of 285 light vehicle movements a day. Not all of them will be there at the same time, but we're fully expecting there to be some significant impacts to residential parking. Thirdly, there's the exhaust stack, size, scale, and the final design. We've seen the final design looking really nice in the EIS, but what we're concerned about is that scale and the size and the finish of that stack really works in with the environment. It's a beautiful environment up the top here, and we're hoping to work with Transport to continue to nut that out down the track. Also, the worksite design. The biggest impact will be the individuals on Kirkwood Street, and we're working with Transport to understand how, when they do dictate to the contractor how this would look, that they do not put any imposing structures which will provide privacy concerns to any of those people that are impacted along the work sites in Kirkwood Street. So hopefully I've given you some things to think about if you're going to look to put forward a response to the EIS. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Okay. Good. Thank you so much, Marco. And again, thank you and your team for the work that you've done. It makes such a difference when we have experts who are doing the work behind the scenes to assist us with these projects. Okay, so something that I think a lot of you are very interested in and may be concerned about, and that is the potential for bottlenecks and rat runs. So fortunately we have Narissa Levy online. Narissa has spent a lot of time looking at this area for us. She's been involved with local community groups since 2017. I guess one of the things that Narissa really brings to the group is that she holds a bachelor degree and postgraduate diploma in psychology, and she works as a market researcher, which she's done for over 25 years, and has worked on a lot of traffic projects in our area so far on behalf of residents. So Narissa, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along tonight. Righto, so it's well known that if you build more roads, it just makes more traffic. All roads and tunnels built in recent years in Sydney have just proven that. Transport planners call it induced demand. Traffic experts we've consulted on this tunnel throughout the process say that our traffic problems will be pretty much back to the same as now within 2 years or so of the tunnel opening. And figures from the EIS documents prove it. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, yay, yeah, thank you. This map shows the areas in our region that will suffer more traffic, increasing delays and rat runnings through local streets as a result of the tunnel being built. A tunnel may create more lanes for traffic in one corridor, but as more and more traffic tries to find its way to the entrance or alternatively away from it, we will see significant bottlenecks and congestion on our local roads. Next slide, please. A few examples are shown in these charts from the EIS documents. The first chart shows the number of vehicles projected per day on our roads. Note the numbers highlighted in pink, showing increased traffic at Bridge Creek Deviation and Condamine Street, Manlyvale. They increased from 20 to 30% in an area with congestion and long delays currently. This area is also planned to grow significantly in the future with more medium to high density housing in Manlyvale. I also like to point out traffic on the Wakehurst Parkway, which is projected to grow 150%, so more than double. Note also the numbers in green, Sydney Road at Seaforth Shops, which has an 11 to 18% decrease to start, but then traffic numbers build up again over time to be of little improvement in the longer term. The second chart shows the average delay at intersections. You can see a slight improvement at Seaforth Junction, which is highlighted in green. That's the number of seconds delay on average. But increasing delays at all other intersections, they're highlighted in pink. It also shows a travel time will more than double from Warringah Road along the Wakehurst Parkway, from 4 minutes with no tunnel to over 10 minutes. So can you move back to the next slide, please? So the travel time savings advertised in the EIS include 38 minutes saved from Balgowlah to the CBD and 55 minutes from Balgowlah to the airport. However, these figures are based on projections in 2037. They assume no other improvements are made to roads or public transport in the interim. They include other tollways that are not yet built, and they're based on the worst of the worst peak conditions. So many people in the community have observed that like a total journey from Balgowlah to the CBD now is only about 30 to 35 minutes. So the suggested 38 minutes saved is clearly exaggerated unless the tunnel is a time machine as well. So the EIS documents, Chapter 9 and Appendix F on traffic claim that increased delays at locations like these at our intersections will be offset by improved network performance. They state this no less than 29 times in the documents. It doesn't take much to realise that with all of these individual delays, the 14 minutes or so that we're meant to gain in the tunnel is quickly eliminated. Rat running will also be a significant problem for many streets in the region, both from traffic trying to find the quickest way into the tunnel and also trying to avoid it, and the $7 to $8 toll. Rat run streets are shown on the map here in red and in blue. The EIS states that rat run traffic will increase through North Balgowlah, shown in red, along Woodbine, Kitchener, taking shortcuts through Wanganella, Rickard and West Streets, all trying to get to the access road to get into the tunnel. It states these streets will be unmanageable unless speed bumps or something similar are installed to push the extra traffic to use Woodland or Condamine streets instead. Whether that will be effective or not, who knows? The EIS doesn't involve themselves in such statements. That's realistically up to council. All this extra traffic makes congestion at local intersections. It makes small residential streets more dangerous, and it increases noise levels for residents at night. So also residents who live to the south of the tunnel portals, they can use the Spit Bridge, but to use the tunnel, they're forced to travel backwards. And those rat runs are shown in blue. Rat runs are anticipated along Ethel, Upper Beach, White Streets, as traffic attempts to avoid increased delays on Sydney Road and Condamine Street. So ultimately, all of this expense and pain is meant to fix the traffic on Military Road. And the EIS modelling on traffic say that it'll have just a 10% reduction in traffic on Military Road. You've got to ask, when the gains are so small, is 10 to 12 billion on this tunnel really worth it? Thanks. Candy, you're on mute.
I knew that would happen. Damn it. I'm trying to be very quiet. So thank you, Narissa. And it's been quite interesting. There's been some good comments and questions coming through. I have a request, guys. Let's use the chat section to put comments in, and let's just use the Q&A specifically for short questions, please. Some of your questions are very, very long, and keep in mind that we have to try and get to them at the end of the session. So use the chat for any general comments that you'd like to make. If you have a specific question, make it short, please, on the Q&A. Alrighty, so our next presenter is Ian Sharp. Ian is a retired civil engineer with a long career in planning, design, construction, management and maintenance of large urban infrastructure projects. And in recent years, he's been very actively involved in resident groups and community work. And Ian's going to talk to us about the project construction timeline. And this is very, very relevant for all of us. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Candy. I can say included in my experience is construction of tunnels in the Sydney Sandstone. Now, the indicative program that you can see on the slide there shows that work will commence in early 2023 and continue through for over 6 years and be scheduled for completion in 2028. Now, I have some concern about whether it'll be able to start in 2023. I mean, we wouldn't mind delays, but there are risks involved. But the work that has to be done, as Terry detailed earlier, the EIS submissions have to be reviewed, and that typically results in further work and design modifications. A final reference design and conditions are prepared, and we understand that should be completed by late 2021. Now then in 2022, this is taken to the market to assess interest in financing, construction and operation of the project. After that, a detailed business case is prepared and submitted to Cabinet, and that can go through various hurdles, I would imagine. And then finally, the tenders are called and contracts negotiated. In my experience, that could not be completed in a year, but the risk here is that the government may rush the process through. And as I say, we might be happy to see it delayed, but this rush process can have very serious outcomes. It's occurred on other major projects and inevitably results in significant overruns of both cost and the project completion date. A good example is the Sydney Light Rail. That contract was rushed through, started early for political reasons, and look what happened there. Now, if we go to the next slide and look at the a little bit more detail, and looking at this one, and then the one at Wakehurst Parkway is not too different. It shows that the Balgowlah one will certainly continue right through the length of the whole project program. So that's the full 6 years. So the impacts in Balgowlah that will be detailed by others and have been detailed by other speakers will occur for at least 6 years. But there's a good chance they'll be considerably longer. Similar projects that have been going on, similar tunnelling projects, the North Connects, which is the tunnel diverting traffic from Pennant Hills Road, and the Northwest Metro Rouse Hill train project, the metro project there, both were similarly, there were similar projects to what we've got here, long tunnels, and they both ran well behind schedule. So what this means that, well, I should add too that tunnels, no matter how detailed the investigations are, you can never find everything, all the problems. The North Connects ran into difficult tunnelling conditions. Around Balgowlah, in fact, all over Sydney, a common one, and I've struck these things myself, volcanic dikes, decayed volcanic dikes, and they can really cause very long delays. So it's very likely that the 6 years will drag out. So unfortunately, we're potentially in for a very rough, long ride. Thanks, Candy.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. So next up is the construction site at the Balgowlah Golf Club. And a number of the questions have been asking this about how this site will work, what impact it will have, how many trucks are coming and going. So I think Narissa's presentation will be of particular interest to many of you. So thank you, Narissa.
Thanks, Candy. Hi again, everybody. It's been so long. Righto, so we're now talking about the Balgowlah Golf Club site. The site there is planned for construction for 6 years, from 2023 to 2028. The first items to be built on the site will be new traffic lights on Bridge Creek Deviation and Maritimo Street. They're shown in red. And the access road between them. So that'll be early on as well. And car parks, layover bays for vehicles, trucks and machinery on the site. Next slide, please. So this is what a section of the construction site looks like now. And next slide. This is pretty much what it could like in the near future. This photograph is from a similar construction site from North Connects. On the site at Balgowlah will be a concrete plant, acoustic shed for tunnelling, which is roughly the size of an aeroplane hangar, a wastewater treatment plant, workshops and staff offices. Here they will excavate using heavy machinery, road headers, rock crushers. They'll mix concrete for lining the tunnel, and they'll handle and stockpile spoil from tunnelling. This spoil will either be trucked out or retained on the site to build embankments to flatten the site for later playing fields. Despite earlier promises to keep Balgowlah oval, it will be removed as part of the construction. Transport for New South Wales marketing materials tell us that in the end, 90% of the area will eventually be returned as public space. But this is unfortunately only achieved by acquiring 34 homes on Dudley Street. Next slide, please. So standard construction hours, as detailed by the EIS, are from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday. And tunnelling underground happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Night works will be conducted when required, including delivering large machinery and doing surface road works. They need to be done when regular traffic is low. Now, as Marco spoke about earlier, contractors ultimately will determine this to a great extent, and they can decide when night work is necessary and when it isn't. Next slide, please. So here are some maps showing local areas that will be impacted by various construction activities from the EIS. The impact zones in these little maps are shown in various colours. If you really want to bore yourself, you can spend a lot of time in the EIS documents looking at all of these. Next slide, please. So this chart shows the number of homes that are estimated to be impacted by noise exceedance levels. Those are levels that Transport for New South Wales admit are beyond normal sort of tolerances. As you can see in the chart there, all up, there are over 4,000 residences that will be subject to these noise increases. There are noise and vibration levels so large, typically over 75 decibels. That's about the sound of a loud TV or an excavator about 15 metres away. So residents subject to this, the noises are so loud that they may be eligible for double glazing to try and minimise the noise, or to some extent they are also potentially housed temporarily in hotels as their own homes are basically unlivable. So yeah, you can see that the Balgowlah construction site has 134 houses that are at that really kind of high level of noise exposure. Next slide, please. So here is a combined map showing all of the areas affected. You can see that when you spread it out over the region, there's pretty much no area that isn't affected. I've indicated there in different colours what the different impacts are, but there's not a lot of extra clear space there. The big impacts to the community during construction will be from noise, vibration from tunnelling. Some of the houses in our area, the tunnel goes underneath them at sort of around 10 to 25 metres depth, so it's quite shallow. Residents will also be subject to dust and also, of course, traffic delays from road diversions and construction traffic. So they're all shown in the different colours on this map. As you can see, many thousands of residents will be impacted over a wide area, not just people who live quite close to the construction sites. In this mix, there are several schools and kindergartens that are predicted to experience noise levels 16 to 21 decibels above the noise management level during times when the kids are there. I think it's important to also remember that this construction goes on for years, so it may cover a child's entire school experience at these local schools. Next slide, please. So construction traffic will also have a significant impact. Shown here is a chart of vehicles from the construction sites in the area. The Balgowlah site is the largest in the area with the most truck movements, despite being the closest to large numbers of residents and schools. It will also host a large number of workers. Hundreds of people will arrive in the early hours and need parking for their own vehicles, potentially on local streets, as Marco detailed, including workers who will be actually shuttle bussed down to the site on Spit Reserve West, down at the Spit. The total number of vehicles going in and out per day is over 3,000, working out to be close to one large truck every minute from Balgowlah, or 4.5 vehicles per minute across all sites travelling through the region. So every minute on average, a large truck carrying tunnel spoil will need to haul their load up the access road, uphill to Sydney Road, coming out right outside Balgowlah Boys High School. These trucks come with heavy diesel fuel exhaust, as well as the trucks will need to idle and create queues getting in and out of the site. So we anticipate most trucks carrying spoil will head south over the Spit and along Military Road, further worsening the traffic there. But there's also no guarantees that they'd not need to travel on local roads. The EIS suggests that main intersections around the site would suffer longer delays, but somehow the traffic would be comparable overall. This seems somewhat fanciful considering the increasing number of heavy trucks. They're slower, they're larger, trying to move through with the regular traffic. So after all that, what will it look like when it's complete? Next slide. So this is the Balgowlah site. It's an animation from Transport for New South Wales that they've created. Next slide. So you can see the access road that will run through the golf course. That's shown in a little sort of light pink arrow, with 2 new traffic lights at each end. Burnt Bridge Creek deviation will be widened from 6 lanes to 12, and the tunnel entrance is circled in blue. It's on a pretty steep hill, so they'll build embankments and retaining walls to flatten some of the site. That's circled in yellow. The unfiltered exhaust stack and tollway facilities building will be on the centre of the site, circled in red. So the exhaust stack here will be 20 metres tall, or about 8 stories high. The only buildings of similar height in the whole region are at Stockland Balgowlah. So we've found that the images that Transport for New South Wales produces here, they're quite misleading. The whole site is only 280 metres wide. So the truck, you can see there's a truck that I've circled in light green down the bottom there. That truck is closer to a matchbox truck in the image. Similarly, the exhaust stack will be much more dominant on the landscape than indicated here. Next slide. The properties shown in sort of shaded purple here are those that will be able to see the exhaust stack from their homes. So the number of properties here is huge, and as you can see, it will dominate the surrounding views in the valley. Next slide. So this image is from the EIS, where they've used perspective to make the exhaust stack, which is just circled in red down there. They've made it look about 2 or 3 stories high, about the same height as a power pole. But in reality, it'll look something a bit more like this. Next slide. There we go. We also don't know yet what the exhaust stack design will look like. As Marco said, we'd hope that it will be somewhat blending into the landscape, but hard to imagine at this point. So next slide, please. Here are some examples from around Sydney. You can see in the middle of the picture there, the old M5 exhaust stack, which was built many years ago. They don't seem to build that one anymore. They tend to make them a little more square, like the image at the bottom there, which is from WestConnex at St. Peter's. Next slide, please. So the exhaust stacks will emit unfiltered, concentrated exhaust from the 7-kilometre length of the tunnel, at Balgowlah in the low point in the valley, and at Seaforth and Wakehurst Parkway. Their impacts potentially cover a 1.2 kilometre radius. There's no safe level of air toxins from these exhausts. Any exposure increases the likelihood of cancers, respiratory diseases and asthma. The marketing material from Transport for New South Wales says emissions from the stacks are indistinguishable from background air quality. But this is simply untrue. They spend a lot of time measuring them, so they're certainly distinguishable. Next slide, please. The EIS states that many locations in our area will have worse air quality as a result of the tunnel project, due to both exhaust stack emissions and from increased surface traffic around the tunnel entrance. Amongst different locations in our area, there are increases in exhaust toxins from 1% to 15%. with generally higher increases for taller buildings. The way that stack plumes work is quite complex, and there's lots of factors that go into it, but taller buildings are generally quite more vulnerable. Most increases in these toxic exhausts are numerically small, and the EIS claims that these increases are okay because almost all are still within official guidelines for exposure. Essentially, our air is so clean now, adding more toxins to it is claimed to still be safe. Perhaps instead we should ask, what is a safe level of cigarettes, for example, for someone to be forced to smoke, just like the community will be forced to breathe in these emissions? Many in the community have asked for the stacks to be filtered, and many all over Sydney have asked for stacks to be filtered for years. And they're done filtered in similar tunnels overseas. Unfortunately, in the government's view, filtration is too expensive to operate and the health benefits are insufficient. Next slide. So, as I've shown, the community around the tunnel entrances will pay a high price for a tunnel. Everyone wants better transport on the northern beaches, but it's really just not justified at this price. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Alrighty, so we're getting close towards the end of the formal presentations. We just have one more to come, which is from Terry LaRue, who's going to address the issue that I think many of you have been asking, and that is what's coming? What's the likely impacts if this tunnel is built? Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Candy, and thank you very much, Narissa, for what really was a very enlightening description of what we can expect for something which doesn't seem to have that many great benefits. Now let's talk about the problem of overdevelopment. This is not something which is addressed in the EIS, and it's not required to address it in the EIS. And the reason why we have some concerns about the potential for overdevelopment is that the government has gone out of its way to deny that it will deliberately mandate new developments on the northern beaches because they have to subsidize the construction of the tunnel. New developments will simply happen. The council cannot really stop the developers because they will just resort to the Land and Environment Court and then even get the government to rezone the land, as it did in Randwick after the light rail was installed, and the government at the time before the light rail was approved gave an undertaking that it would not rezone the land. The community can expect there to be significant development around the Northern Beaches Hospital precinct. That's already been discussed, and it has also provided for the council's draft housing strategy. The council's strategy expects new residences to be built in Manly Vale because these are the reasons of the close access to a beeline terminal and a portal of the Beaches Link Tunnel. What can residents in the Corso and Eastern Hill expect from the tunnel? Well, there will be these savings that you will have in the mornings when you want to travel to the city or to the airport. These are savings that are estimated for 2037, and as Narissa pointed out, it currently takes less than 38 minutes to get, even on a busy day, into the city unless there are serious traffic snarls on Military Road. These time savings for 237 were estimated before the benefits of the Beeline bus service and the DY to Chatswood Express service were taken into account. The long-term impact of work from home has not only been ignored, but Transport for New South Wales claims that the traffic levels are expected to return to their historic trajectory. So they are assuming that work from home will not become a significant factor. And while I was discussing this with Transport for New South Wales, I was texted by somebody there to say that their new work program on work from home had been formally adopted, and they will have, even in Transport for New South Wales, a hybrid model. If it's easier to drive out of the Northern Beaches, it will be easier to drive into the Northern Beaches, especially over the weekends. And there are a number of warnings which we had during the recent summer when the weather was hot, and we can expect after the tunnel is built at least as many as 40,000 cars per weekend will come looking for parking. If you think it's currently a challenge in the summer to park closer to Clontarf Reserve, Little Manly Beach, Shetty Beach, Freshwater Beach, and Manly Beach, wait until the tunnel has been built. And that sign which you get on your social media pages from the council in relation to the congestion at Clontarf Beach during the summer, when the police suggested to the council that they send out this notice because emergency vehicles would not be able to get in and out under those circumstances, they will become common during the summer. So Candy has asked me to wrap up the views that I have on what can you do as a result of participating in the seminar. So I think I'll hand it over to Candy to express her views on this. Thank you, Candy.
Candy, you're on mute.
Gosh, sorry about that. I think one of the first questions that people are asking is when do the submissions actually close?
So it's the end of this month, Candy.
End of this month, so that means we still have a couple of weeks effectively. So a couple of things that we need to just address. First of all, we've had a lot of questions in relation to the Northern Beaches Council and the local traffic, and I know that Sarah Grattan is online. Terry, can we get access to Sarah? And I'll ask Sarah if you could answer just the question in relation to what is Northern Beaches Council doing in relation to local traffic? We understand that the state government is saying it's our responsibility. Do you have a response for us on that one? Are we able to get Sarah online, Terry?
Yes, I'll just finish this last slide because it talks about the webinar. And what Sarah has to say is very important because the council is going to has a very big role to play. When you if you make a submission to express your concerns that the government wants to rush through a decision to proceed with a design that, number one, has big risks for the environment, number two, has only marginal benefits in traffic reduction along Military Road, and number three, has a big increase in congestion in Manlyvale and in Balgowlah, number four, will massively increase traffic coming to the Northern Beaches in the summer. When you make your submission, you have to choose objection and not just comments, because if you only get a comment, they assume that you support the tunnel. If you want some advice on making a submission, you can go to the Viable Transport Solutions website, which we will email to you after in the next few days, and we shall be sharing our submission to the EIS widely, and you can use as much material as you want if you agree with whatever you agree with from our submission.
Okay. Good, thank you, Terry.
Now, as far as I know, Sarah has been invited as a panelist, and therefore, as a panelist, she should be able to speak.
She is online. Just while we're lining that up, we might just also cover off a couple of the other questions. So a lot of despair and a lot of concern, and I think that's why we really felt it was important that we spend a bit of time with you tonight. We're not saying that this should or shouldn't go ahead. What we're really saying is let's have a look at what the issues are and let's see what can be done to resolve them. There was one question asked whether we could do a petition. Petition is a waste of time. As Terry pointed out, this does go through a stage, a process, and the process is well underway. So submissions are very important. I think one of the things that keeps coming up is concerns about the environment. There's a number of questions, and I think probably Narissa, you might want to answer this in relation to filtered stacks, and the fact that there's a lot of concern about how close these stacks are to schools, and if any consideration's been given to that, and if there is any other schools in Sydney that are as close to stacks as these ones are likely to be.
Thanks, Candy. I can talk a little bit on this. Basically, whilst we've talked tonight about Balgowlah and Seaforth, there's also Camaray at the other end of the tunnel, and it has Anzac Public School that's roughly 200 to 300 metres away from the stack on the other end of the tunnel. So there's an awful lot of schools that are close to these exhaust stacks. In terms of filtration, the government walks a really fine line on how they say it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make enough of a difference to justify the cost. And ultimately, overseas, there are many, many tunnels of this kind of length. We're talking over 5 kilometres. Ours is 7 kilometres. Long tunnels like this generally are filtered overseas. And yeah, it is an expensive process to go through, but ultimately it does reduce the levels of emissions that come out. Simple.
Okay, and do we know who monitors the air quality and the noise quality of such projects?
I wouldn't be prepared to answer that question off the cuff, but we can certainly update that on the Q&A page.
Okay, great. We'll undertake to do that. All right. There was also some questions in relation to Manly Dam. I think, Anne, you were happy to answer that. The areas on both sides of Wakehurst Parkway support a wide variety of local natural flora and fauna. Will there be a provision for wildlife as well as pedestrians and cyclists to cross beneath Wakehurst Parkway so that disruption to their normal roaming is kept to a minimum? Is that something you can answer, Anne, or somebody else?
Yes, no, I can answer that. So I did have that as one of my slides. You'd be able to see the one that towards the end, the Wakehurst Parkway fauna. I know it was very small, but you can look at it later. But yes, there are 3 new rope crossings, 3 new fauna underpasses, and there's 3 shared user underpasses, and there's fauna fences that will be in place, wire fences that will be in place during the construction, and then they haven't decided what will happen operationally. So it's one thing to do that, it's whether those processes actually work, and what happens during the whole period of construction when they get separated one side to the other. They get separated from their nesting places, and there's some foxes, some bats that are in the Wakehurst Parkway Sydney Water area that are endangered, that have that as their breeding ground. So when you clear that completely, that leaves, so none of the other options actually provide options, and that's when you start doing biobanking credits. So yes, things have been planned, but
all right. There have been a number of comments which are very valid, and that is that we tend to be focusing on the negative and not the positive sides of the tunnel. I mean, obviously, it's our job tonight to identify things that people may not be aware of, and that's what we've endeavoured to do. And I think, again, we've just covered off some of the positive things that they're doing to handling animal movements and so on, but there are lots of areas I think residents are more concerned about, and we felt that it was our role to show those to you. There was a question, I think, have we any luck with Sarah? She has indicated to me that she is unmuted. I'm not sure how we can get her online. No.
She's there.
Yeah, I should be here. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're here.
She's there.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, everybody.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Candy, and thank you to all the thank you all the panelists. If I just quickly address what Council has been doing in relation to the EIS. So, like all of the community, we've got till the 1st of March to put in our submission. The Council staff have been working very hard over the holidays across all departments, pulling together information from the EIS, drilling into the EIS to identify many of the impacts, and there's a lot of overlap with some of the information we've heard from tonight. So the Council submission will be up live later this week, probably Wednesday. The Council papers come out, as our submission, and that will be going to the council meeting the following week, the 22nd of February, I believe, Candy, the Tuesday week. So the Transport and Travel Strategic Reference Group, of which I'm the chair, had an extraordinary meeting in late January. And what was really encouraging about that meeting is we had around 40 different members of staff from all different departments of council who'd been spending the summer drilling into their relative chapters of the EIS. I haven't seen the submission, the draft submission as yet, but from the conversations I was having with the community, with the staff, you know, I think we will see a lot of those submissions. Something I have asked, once the submission goes live and once the council has adopted that we put it out for comment for the community and seek feedback. Now that will be too late for the submission deadline unless we can manage to be successful in asking for an extension, which I note the community so far hasn't been successful in that request, and neither have the school P&C groups that have also put in that request. But, you know, Candy, perhaps we can try again next week. But in any event, the feedback will be very valuable for council on our submissions to see, you know, whether the community sees it in a similar way. We'll be able to use that information to feedback directly to Transport for New South Wales, and more particularly for the detailed design phase, which I believe will be the next phase after this EIS phase. You know, there are a few additional issues that the staff have identified that the community here haven't brought up tonight. So there's some issues around water flows, cross catchments, but in the tunnel, and so water seeping through the walls of the tunnel and being pumped out, and then that sort of cross-contamination of various catchments was one of the items. A lot of the others we've addressed. I spoke to Marco last week about some of these parking and issues, and I've managed to get the staff to look at those issues as well. So hopefully that they will be reflected in our submission. So I'm yet to see the final version. I'll see it with everybody else in the middle of the week. But the staff are taking this very, very seriously. It's the biggest infrastructure project ever for the Northern Beaches. And so it should be taken very seriously. And the rat run information, and thank you for that, Narissa, that has certainly been an area of focus for the traffic and travel team at council as well. They're looking at how those local roads will be impacted, and it's a big gap in the EIS. Something else that they've looked at is the access through Burnt Bridge Creek deviation through the Balgowlah Golf Course, and looking at alternatives to how that might be able to be achieved without traffic lights at that area. And I think that'll be quite important in terms of local road effects as well. If we can avoid traffic lights there, you know, I mean, assuming we're getting this thing, then, you know, it's about how do we minimise the negative impacts on our local communities. And we've heard from tonight, there's a lot of impacts. So there's a lot of things for us to try to help minimise. So I don't know if there's anything more specific anybody wanted to hear about.
Yes, there are a couple of questions asking, does the Northern Beaches Council support the Beachlink Tunnel?
So the official position that was adopted by council was to support subject to minimising negative impacts on the local community. So that was when that last passed through council was at 2018, I think, Candy.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so as I say, we'll be coming to council on I think it's the 23rd of February, our submission, and I really encourage you to have a look at that. As Sarah said, a lot of work has been done on that. It's our role to make sure that the least impact happens to our residents as possible. Now, there's a lot of very detailed questions here that I don't think our panel is really equipped to answer, particular questions about Spit Road and Epping Road, you know, and all that sort of jazz, which I don't think is within our area. I think time is marching on. I guess the best thing to do is to perhaps wrap this up if everybody's comfortable. Really thank you for your time this evening. It's been a fantastic presentation. And just to reassure you that we will go through your questions again, make sure there has been a lot of them, make sure that we do address them for you on the website in the next couple of days. And finally, I really want to remind you, it's very important to at least do something. If you are concerned about this, at least do something. Go through and hit the object section and put in a couple of comments. If you don't feel confident about doing a proper submission, it's important to at least register something. And the team is here to assist you. And as we say, there are some good parts to this project. We're not bagging the whole thing. What we're saying is there are a lot of areas that we are concerned about that do need to be considered in more detail. So finally, I really want to thank our panellists, Terry LaRue, Bruce Kitson, Louise Williams, Anne Collins, Ian Sharp, Larissa Levy and Marco Corrant. These guys have worked so hard to get this information together for you, and on your behalf, I really want to thank them. And the large team of volunteers from the Balgowlah Residents Group, in particular, Anna, Jenny, Joe, Ern, Denise, Andrea and Megan, you guys rock. And a very big special thank you to Narissa and Terry LaRue, who have just worked so hard to pull this together for us tonight. And finally, I really want to thank you for coming online and taking interest in this proposed major project, which will have a major impact on our lives for years to come. So thank you, everybody, and good night.